The massive ship Eternal Dawn moved slowly through space, its hull stretching for miles in every direction. Inside the command center, Commander Race studied the star map floating before him. His blue skin gleamed under the soft lights as he marked another system as explored. 300 years he had been doing this job, cataloging every living species in the galaxy for the Great Census. Commander called Buzz from the navigation station. The insect-like aliens for arms moved. Quickly over the controls, we have reached the next system on our list. Designation Sal 3 shows signs of life. Race nodded and walked to the main viewing screen. Below them, a blue and green planet turned slowly, began standard scanning procedures. What do we know about the dominant species? Prism, their communications officer, spoke in her crystal-clear voice. Her entire body was made of living crystal that rang like bells when she moved. Initial scans show bipedal mammals. They call themselves humans. Technology level is primitive. They have not yet left their home planet permanently. Flo drifted over from the engineering station. The gaseous alien had no solid form, just a cloud of thinking mist contained in a special suit. Their energy output is minimal. No fusion power detected. They still burn fossil fuels for most of their energy needs. Race frowned. This was disappointing, but not unusual. Most species were discovered before they reached space travel. Physical capabilities? Buzz consulted his instruments. Strength, speed, and durability. No natural weapons or armor. Lifespan approximately 100 of their years. It's very short by galactic standards. Any unique abilities? Race asked, though he expected the answer. None detected, Prism replied.
Hey!
They appear to be a completely ordinary species in every measurable way. Race sighed. Another routine classification then. The galaxy was full of ordinary species. Most never made it beyond their home worlds. Those that did usually became minor members of the Confederation, contributing little and taking up space. Still, protocol demanded they observe the species for several days before making official contact. Take us into high orbit, Race ordered. Begin detailed observations. I want a full behavioral analysis before we introduce ourselves. The ship moved closer to Earth. Through the advanced sensors, they could see the humans going about their daily lives. Cities sprawled across the continents. Vehicles moved along roads. Aircraft flew through the atmosphere. It all looked perfectly normal and uninteresting. On the third day of observation, something changed. The ship's sensors detected massive ground movement on one of the larger continents. A tectonic plate shifted, causing what the humans called an earthquake. The tremor measured high on their primitive scales, and it struck near a large population. Center. Fascinating, Flo commented as they watched the event unfold, and this will provide excellent data on how the species responds to natural disasters. What they saw next confused them all. Instead of scattering to save themselves, the humans ran toward the danger. Emergency vehicles rushed to the affected areas. Ordinary citizens left their safe homes to help dig through the rubble. They saw humans risked their lives to save complete strangers trapped under collapsed buildings. That makes no sense, Buzz said. All four of his eyes focused on the screen. Why would they endanger themselves for unrelated individuals? Race watched as a human female crawled into a dangerous gap between fallen concrete slabs to reach a crying child. The structure could collapse further at any moment, crushing them both. But she kept going anyway. Perhaps they are related. Prism ran a biological scan. Negative.
Ow.
No genetic relationship detected between the rescuer and the child. They continued. Watching in amazement, humans shared food and water with strangers. They opened their homes to people they had never met. Medical personnel worked for days without rest to treat the injured. Construction workers used their own equipment and materials to clear debris, expecting no payment. This behavior serves no evolutionary purpose, Flo observed. They gain nothing from these actions. In fact, they lose resources and put themselves at risk. But the most confusing part came when they observed the aftermath. The humans did not fight over the limited supplies that arrived. Instead, they organized distribution systems to make sure everyone got what they needed. The strong helped the weak, the healthy cared for the injured. Those with more shared with those who had less. I have never seen anything like this, Race admitted. In his 3 centuries of studying alien species, he had observed many responses to disaster. Usually, it was every individual for themselves. The strong took from the weak. Groups fought over resources. Leaders abandoned their followers to save themselves. Buzz was equally puzzled. A species swarms to protect the hive, but these humans are not from the same hive. They do not even know each other. The Talon species fights bravely, Prism added, but only for honor and glory. These humans gain no honor from this behavior. My people seek knowledge above all else, Flo said, but this behavior teaches them nothing new. It is inefficient and illogical. Race studied the data for hours. Every species in the galaxy was driven by something clear and understandable. The need for survival, reproduction, territory, resources, power, knowledge, or honor. These were the basic motivations that drove all intelligent life. But humans seemed to be driven by something else entirely. Something the Confederation's scientists had never encountered before. He watched as the rescue efforts continued. A human male spent his entire savings to buy supplies for families he did not know. A group of human children gave away their toys to other children who had lost everything. An elderly human female cooked meals for rescue workers, refusing to accept any payment. Commander Prism said quietly, "I am detecting something unusual in their communications." "What kind of unusual?" "They keep using words that do not translate." "Well, purpose. Meaning, the right thing to do. Duty to others. Making a difference. These concepts do not exist in our databases." Race felt a chill run through his body. In all his years of cataloging species, he had never encountered concepts that could not be translated. Every intelligent species used different words, but the basic ideas were always the same. Survival, dominance, territory, reproduction, knowledge. The fundamental drives of life. "Continue monitoring," he ordered. "I want to understand this behavior before we make contact." Days passed and the human response remained consistent. They worked together with a coordination that impressed even Buzz, whose hive mind species was famous for cooperation. They sacrificed personal resources for the common good. They risked their safety for strangers. And through it all, they seemed driven by something that had no name in any galactic language. Race realized they were observing something unprecedented. These humans were not just another ordinary species. They possessed something that made them fundamentally different from every other form of life in the galaxy. He just had no idea what to call it, or whether it made them incredibly dangerous or incredibly valuable. The Eternal Dawn prepared to make first contact with a species that challenged everything the Confederation thought they knew about intelligent life. Admiral Koroth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Talon, and studied the blue planet below. The massive war vessel was one of 50 ships in the assessment fleet, sent to evaluate the newest species discovered by the Great Census. His claws tapped impatiently against the command console as he reviewed the initial reports. "Humans," he growled, his voice carrying the authority of a warrior who had conquered 12 star systems. "The most pathetic species we have encountered in decades?" His aide, Captain Thorne, nodded in agreement. "Admiral capabilities are laughable, Admiral. Their strongest individuals are weaker than our children. Their technology is primitive. They have no space-based weapons and no planetary defenses." Koroth's golden eyes gleamed with disdain. The Talon species had built their empire through strength and conquest. They respected only power, and these humans had none. "Have our analysts completed their study of human history?" "Yes, Admiral. The results are ... confusing." Thorne activated a holographic display showing human conflicts throughout their history. "They do engage in warfare, but their motivations make no sense." Koroth studied the data with growing bewilderment. Human wars were not fought for the usual reasons. They did not fight to expand territory or gain resources. Dead! They fought for abstract concepts that had no meaning to galactic civilization. Freedom, justice, equality, democracy. "What is democracy?" Koroth asked. "A system where the weak choose their leaders instead of the strong taking power naturally," Thorne explained. "It makes no tactical sense." They watched recordings of human conflicts, soldiers who threw themselves on explosive devices to save their comrades, civilians who hid refugees from enemy forces, risking their own lives, entire populations who refused to surrender even when facing certain defeat. "This is suicide, not warfare," Koroth declared. No. Wondered they never left their planet. They're too busy destroying themselves over imaginary concepts. But as he studied the data more carefully, something began to trouble him. The humans did not fight like any species he had encountered. When the Talons conquered a world, the defeated either died fighting or surrendered to serve the victors. But these humans did something different. They fought not just for victory, but for principles that seemed more important to them than life itself. "Show me their response to the Confederation's first contact," Koroth ordered. The hologram changed. To show the meeting between Commander Race and Earth's leaders, Koroth expected to see either the usual cowering submission of weak species or the foolish aggression of those too stupid to recognize superior power. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The human leader, President Torres, stood calmly before the assembled alien delegation. She showed no fear, but also no hostility. Instead, she asked questions that no other species had ever asked during first contact. "What can Earth contribute to the galactic community?" Torres had said. "How can we help other species? What challenges face the galaxy that we might assist with?" Koroth's claws extended involuntarily. She asks what she can give, not what she can take. "Yes, Admiral." Their entire delegation seemed more interested in helping others than in gaining advantage for themselves. This was unprecedented. Every species the Confederation had encountered was motivated by self-interest. The shards sought perfection for themselves. The voids pursued knowledge to increase their own power. The Ek expanded their hive to ensure their survival. Even the peaceful species were ultimately concerned with their own welfare. "Continue monitoring their communications," Koroth ordered. "I want to understand their true motivations." Days passed. As the fleet's analysts studied every aspect of human society, they watched humans in their daily lives, observed their governance, analyzed their entertainment, and tried to understand their culture. What they found challenged everything the Confederation believed about intelligent life. Humans routinely sacrificed their own interests for others. They had organizations dedicated to helping strangers in distant lands, sent aid to regions that could never repay them. They protected endangered species, even when it cost them economically. They created laws to help the weak instead of allowing the strong to dominate naturally. "Admiral," reported Commander Vex, the fleet's chief analyst, "I believe I have identified their primary weakness." Finally, Koroth growled, "What is it?" "Are driven by what they call purpose. They need to believe their actions serve some greater meaning beyond their own survival or benefit." Koroth frowned. "That is not a weakness. That is insanity. Perhaps, but it is consistent across their entire species. They will sacrifice everything for abstract concepts like justice, freedom, and the welfare of others. They cannot simply exist. They must believe their existence has meaning." This revelation disturbed Koroth more than any weapon could have. Species that fought for invisible concepts was unpredictable. How could you negotiate with beings who valued ideas more than life? How could you conquer people who would die for principles instead of surrendering to preserve themselves? "Sir," Thorne interrupted, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Put it on screen." President Torres appeared on the display, her expression serious but not hostile. "Admiral Koroth, we know you are studying us to determine whether we pose a threat to galactic peace. We want to assure you that Earth has no aggressive intentions toward any species." Koroth leaned forward. "Then why do you maintain military forces?" "To protect the innocent and preserve freedom," Torres replied without hesitation. "We believe every intelligent being has the right to determine their own fate. And if we determined that Earth must be destroyed for the safety of the galaxy," Torres was quiet for a long moment, "then we would fight you. Not because we want to harm you, but because we have a duty to protect the innocent people of our world." The transmission ended, leaving Koroth staring at the blank screen. The human had just admitted they would fight a vastly superior force. Not for conquest or even survival, but for duty. They would choose certain death over abandoning their principles. Admiral Vex said quietly, "I believe these humans are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. 'Cause they are strong? No, sir. 'Cause they fight for something more powerful than strength. They fight for meaning." Koroth turned to study the blue planet again. He had conquered dozens of worlds, defeated countless enemies, and built an empire that spanned star systems. But he had never faced an enemy that could not be defeated through superior power. How do you conquer a species that values invisible concepts more than their own lives? For the first time in his military career, Admiral Koroth felt uncertainty. The humans were weak in every measurable way, but they possessed something that made them unpredictable and potentially unstoppable. They had found something worth dying for that was not territory, resources, or power. "Prepare a full report for the Confederation Council," Koroth ordered. "Classification, unknown threat level. Recommendation, continued observation." He could not bring himself to classify them as harmless, despite their obvious weakness. Something about their strange motivation made him deeply uncomfortable. They were like no enemy he had ever faced, because they were not really enemies at all. They were something entirely new in the galaxy. And Admiral Koroth had no idea what that meant for the future of interstellar civilization. The emergency session of the Confederation Council was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. Their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound, light, and energy patterns. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the devastating truth that had brought them together. "The Devourers have consumed 17 star systems in the past month," announced Prime Counselor Axios, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years. Their advance shows no signs of slowing. The assembled delegates erupted in panic. The shards sang their crystalline songs of fear. The voids flickered with nervous energy. The Vec buzzed in agitated swarms. Only the humans sat quietly there. Small delegation, led by Captain Ross, listening intently to every word. Admiral Koroth stood to address the assembly. "The Talon fleet has engaged the enemy 3 times. Each battle ended in complete defeat. Their technology is beyond our understanding. Their ships appear to be made of the consumed matter of entire worlds. My people have analyzed their behavior patterns," reported Dr. Nexus of the Void Collective. "The Devourers are not a natural species. They are machines, possibly billions of years old, programmed to convert all matter into additional copies of themselves." Captain Ross raised her hand to speak. The chamber fell silent, not from respect, but from curiosity. Humans had been members of the Confederation for less than a year, and their military contributions were considered negligible. "What do the Devourers want?" she asked simply. Dr. Nexus flickered with confusion. "Want? They are machines. They do not want anything. Simply follow their programming to consume and replicate." But why were they created? What was their original purpose? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every species had motivations, goals, and desires. Even machines were built to serve some function. But no one had considered what the Devourers were originally designed to do. "The question is irrelevant," Admiral Koroth declared. "They are destroying everything in their path. We must find a way to stop them or evacuate threatened systems." "Evacuation is impossible, Prime Counselor," Axios said sadly. "They are advancing too quickly. Entire populations cannot be moved in time." The chamber descended into chaos as species began arguing over limited resources and evacuation priorities. The Talons demanded military support for their worlds. Shards wanted to retreat to their perfect crystal cities. The Voids proposed studying the enemy while there was still time. The Vec buzzed about coordinated swarm attacks. Through it all, the human delegation sat quietly, listening to every proposal and argument. Finally, Captain Ross stood again. "Earth volunteers to help with evacuation efforts," she announced. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Koroth laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "Humans have 12 small ships with basic alien technology. What could you possibly contribute?" "We can buy time," Ross replied calmly. Our ships can serve as rear guard, while civilian transports escape. That is suicide, Dr. Nexus observed. Human vessels would be destroyed instantly. Yes, Ross agreed. But every minute we delay the Devourers gives more innocents a chance to escape. The other species stared at her in disbelief. The humans were volunteering to sacrifice themselves for populations they had never met, on worlds they had never seen, for people who considered them the weakest members of the Confederation. This is illogical, buzzed Hive Queen Zek of the deck. Your species would gain nothing from this sacrifice. We would gain the knowledge that we did everything possible to save lives, Ross answered. That is enough. Over the following weeks, as the Devourer fleet advanced through the galaxy, the human ships proved true to their word. They appeared at every threatened system, not to fight for victory, but to buy precious time for evacuations. Small vessels, laughably weak by galactic standards, threw themselves against the mechanical tide with desperate courage. At the crystal world of Harmony, Captain Bell led 4 human ships against a Devourer fleet of 50 vessels. The humans lasted barely 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes allowed the last transport full of shard children to escape to safety. At the gas giant refinery stations of the Void Collective, Commander Park coordinated the rescue of 3 million workers. Her ship stayed behind to guide the final evacuation shuttles through the asteroid field, while Devourer scouts closed in. She was still transmitting navigation data when her ship was consumed. At the Vec breeding worlds, Lieutenant Nova organized a desperate defense that saved an entire generation of larvae. The Vec had never understood individual sacrifice, but they watched in amazement as humans died. One by one, to protect creatures that were not even their own species, but the most remarkable event occurred at the research station, orbiting Kepler 7. Dr. Wells, the human philosopher, was trapped there with a mixed group of scientists from various species when the Devourers arrived. The station had no weapons and no escape ships. As the mechanical fleet approached, the alien scientists prepared to die. But Dr. Wells began talking to them about human philosophy, about the concept of purpose and meaning. She explained that death was not the end if it served something greater than oneself. Every species in this galaxy has survived by being strong, she said to the assembled group. But humans learned to survive by being meaningful. He found that existence without purpose is not really living at all. When the Devourers boarded the station, they found something unprecedented. Instead of fleeing or fighting, the mixed group of scientists stood together, each species supporting the others. The shards used their perfectionist nature to coordinate defenses. The voids shared their knowledge freely. The Vec protected the weaker species instead of their own hive. For the first time in galactic history, representatives of different species worked together, not from necessity, but from choice. They had learned something from the humans that their own cultures had never taught them: the power of shared purpose. The station was eventually consumed. But the survivors who escaped in the final shuttle carried more than just their lives. They carried a new understanding of what it meant to fight for something greater than oneself. Across the galaxy, other species began to notice the change. The Talon warriors, who had watched humans die to save strangers, began to question their own motivations. The shards, who had been rescued by human sacrifice, started to wonder if perfection meant more than just personal achievement. The voids, who had received freely shared human knowledge, began to see the value of cooperation over competition. Captain Ross, now commanding the largest human fleet ever assembled, addressed the Confederation Council one final time before the decisive battle at the galactic core. "We know we are the weakest species here," she said. "We know our ships are small and our weapons are primitive. But we also know something that the Devourers do not understand. We know why we fight. The Devourers were created to consume and replicate," she continued. "But they have no purpose beyond that. They exist, but they do not live. They function, but they do not mean anything." She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of dozens of species. "Every one of you has something the Devourers lack. You have reasons to exist beyond mere survival. You have purposes that give your lives meaning, that makes you stronger than any machine. As the combined fleets of the galaxy prepared for the final confrontation, something had changed. Were no longer separate species fighting for their own survival. They had become something new. Something that had never existed before in galactic history. A unified force fighting for a shared purpose. The humans had given them something more valuable than technology or weapons. They had given them a reason to fight that went beyond fear or self-preservation. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to have purpose, and that gift was about to change everything. The memorial service for Captain Ross and her fallen crew was held aboard the neutral station at Galactic Center. Representatives from every member species attended, creating a gathering unlike any in recorded history. The usual diplomatic protocols were forgotten as beings who had never shown emotion wept openly for humans they had barely known. Dr. Wells stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd. Crystalline shards resonated with mournful harmonics. Gaseous voids flickered with patterns of grief. Insectoid that clicked their mandibles in rhythmic tribute. Even the proud Talons bowed their heads in respect. Captain Ross asked me to speak at her memorial if she did not survive, Dr. Wells began. She wanted me to explain why she and her crew chose to fight when they knew they could not win. The chamber was silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. For the first time in galactic history, hundreds of different species listened. With one purpose, Ross told me that humans have always been afraid of dying meaninglessly, Dr. Wells continued. We fear that our lives might not matter, that our existence might serve no purpose. So we create meaning through our actions. We choose to fight for things that are bigger than ourselves. Prime Counselor Axios leaned forward. But what is the value of meaning if it leads to death? Because meaning is what makes life worth living. Dr. Wells replied, Captain Ross did not die meaninglessly. She died so that others could live. Her death had purpose, and that purpose continues in every life she saved. Admiral Koroth stood up, his massive frame towering over the assembly. I have conquered 12 star systems. I have defeated countless enemies. But I have never understood why the humans fight harder than my own warriors despite being weaker. He paused, his golden eyes reflecting something that might have been shame. I watched Captain Ross choose certain death to save strangers. My own people fight for honor and glory. But Ross fought for something I had no word for until now. She fought for duty to others. Hive Queen Zeke's buzzing voice filled the chamber. The Vec have always worked together, but only to protect our own hive. These humans work to protect everyone, even species they do not know. The shards seek perfection, added Harmonic Prime Krista, her voice ringing like bells. But we seek perfection only for ourselves. The humans seek to perfect the galaxy for all species. Dr. Nexus flickered with new understanding. The voids pursue knowledge to increase our own power, but the humans share their knowledge freely, seeking to increase everyone's power. As the memorial continued, something remarkable began to happen. Each species started to examine their own motivations. In light of what they had learned from humanity, the Talons began to question whether conquest truly brought honor. The shards wondered if individual perfection meant anything without helping others achieve it too. The voids considered whether knowledge hoarded was knowledge wasted days after. The memorial reports began arriving from across the galaxy. The change was subtle at first, but it was spreading like ripples in still water. Talon fleets that had been preparing to defend their own territories began coordinating with other species. Shard artisans started creating beautiful objects, not for their own cities, but as gifts for refugee camps. Void researchers began sharing their discoveries instead of keeping them secret. On the planet Harmony, a mixed group of survivors from different species worked together to rebuild their destroyed city. For the first time, shards and talons collaborated as equals. While voids provided technical expertise and Thek offered their coordinated labor, the humans among them served as mediators, helping the different species understand each other. "It is remarkable," observed Commander Thorne, watching the construction through his ship's sensors. "They are building something that belongs to no single species, but to all of them." Admiral Koroth nodded slowly. "The humans called it unity. I thought it was weakness. Now I begin to understand that it might be the strongest force in the galaxy." change was most visible in the refugee camps scattered throughout safe systems. Before, each species had maintained separate facilities, helping only their own kind. Now, mixed camps began to appear where different species worked together. Shard healers tended to Talon wounds. Void engineers repaired that equipment. Humans organized everything with their strange ability to see connections between different groups. Engineer Patel, one of the few human officers to survive the recent battles, found herself in charge of a massive refugee processing center. She had never imagined that her job would involve coordinating between dozens of different species, each with their own needs and abilities. The key is finding what each species does best, she explained to her mixed staff. Shards are perfect at organizing supplies. Talons are excellent at security. Voids can calculate resource distribution. That can handle mass transportation. Everyone has something valuable to contribute. But the most significant change was happening in the Confederation Council itself. For the first time in its history, the Council began making decisions based not on what benefited individual species, but on what was best for the galaxy as a whole. The concept of shared purpose, learned from humanity, was transforming galactic politics. We face a choice. Dr. Wells addressed the Council during an emergency session. We can continue fighting the Devourers as separate species, each protecting our own interests, or we can fight as one galaxy, united by a common purpose. And what purpose is that? Asked Prime Counselor Axios. To preserve not just our lives, but the meaning of our lives, Dr. Wells replied. To ensure that intelligence, creativity, and compassion survive in the universe. To prove that existence can be more than just consuming and replicating. The debate that followed was heated but different from any previous council discussion. Instead of arguing about territorial rights or resource allocation, the species debated about values, purposes, and the kind of galaxy they wanted to create. The Talons proposed using their warrior culture to protect the weak instead of conquering. The Shards suggested perfecting systems that would benefit everyone, not just themselves. The Voids offered to share their accumulated knowledge freely with all species. The Ek volunteered their coordinated labor for galactic reconstruction projects. This is what the humans meant by purpose, Admiral Koroth realized. It is not about what we can take from the galaxy. It is about what we can give to it. As the council session ended, the representatives began to understand that they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right to exist as beings capable of meaning, purpose, and selfless action. The humans had shown them that there was something worth fighting for that was bigger than any individual species, or even any individual life. The Devourers represented pure consumption without purpose. They were the opposite of everything the galaxy's species were learning to value. The coming battle would not just determine who lived and who died. It would determine whether the universe belonged to beings who could find meaning in existence, or to machines that could only consume and replicate, for the first time since the crisis began. The Confederation faced the enemy with something more powerful than advanced technology or superior numbers. They faced them with unity of purpose. And that changed everything. The combined fleet that approached the Galactic Center was the largest armada ever assembled in known history. Ships from every member species flew in perfect formation, their different designs creating a tapestry of united purpose against the star-filled void. At the heart of this massive fleet, Engineer Patel sat in the command chair of the volunteer ship Hope's End, surrounded by crew members from a dozen different species. Devourer construct detected, announced Buzz from the navigation station. His 4 arms moved efficiently over the controls, while his compound eyes tracked multiple displays simultaneously. It is larger than our estimates predicted. Through the main viewing screen, they could see the enemy's ultimate creation. The Devourers had wrapped the Galactic Center's massive black hole in a web of machinery that stretched for millions of miles. The construct pulsed with dark energy as it slowly converted the black hole's mass into computational power and additional Devourer units. They are turning the heart of our galaxy into a factory, observed Prism, her crystalline voice, carrying harmonics of fear and determination. If they complete this project, they will have unlimited resources to consume everything. Admiral Koroth's voice crackled over the communication system from his flagship. All units, prepare for final assault. Remember, we are not fighting for conquest or glory. We fight for the right to exist with purpose. Flo drifted closer to Patel's station, his gaseous form shimmering with nervous energy. The volunteer mission is ready to launch. Are you certain about this plan? Patel nodded, looking around at her diverse crew. They had all volunteered for what everyone knew was a one-way mission into the heart of the Devourer construct. We have something the Devourers do not understand. We know why we are here. The battle began with a coordinated assault that would have been impossible just months earlier. Talon warships provided aggressive cover, while Shard vessels created perfect defensive formations. Void ships phased through space to strike at weak points while Vex swarms overwhelmed enemy sensors with their numbers. Human ships, still the smallest and weakest in the fleet, served as coordinators and communicators, helping the different species work together seamlessly. But the Devourers were not the same enemy they had faced before. The massive construct had given them processing power beyond imagination, and they adapted to every tactic within minutes. Ships that had served effectively in previous battles found themselves outmatched by enemies that learned and evolved in real time. The construct is our only target, Patel announced to her crew as they broke away from the main battle. If we can reach the central processing core, we can deploy our gift to the galaxy. The Hope's End dove toward the construct's heart, dodging massive energy beams and swarms of defensive drones. Round them, great battle raged as species that had never trusted each other fought side by side with unprecedented coordination. Patel, Admiral Koroth's voice came over the communication system. You have 17 minutes before the construct's defenses adapt to our attack patterns. After that, no ship will be able to reach the core. Understood, Patel replied. She turned to her crew. You all know what we are carrying. Not a weapon, but a question. The most powerful question humans have ever discovered. In the ship's cargo bay sat humanity's final contribution to the Galactic War effort. It was not a bomb or a virus in the traditional sense. It was something far more dangerous to a machine intelligence. A program that asked why. Dr. Wells had designed it during the darkest days of the crisis. Every Devourer unit is connected to their central intelligence, she had explained. They share processing power and knowledge instantaneously. If we can introduce the concept of purpose into their network, it will spread to every unit simultaneously. The Hope's End penetrated deeper into the construct, its hull taking damage from defensive systems. Crew members from different species worked together with smooth efficiency, each contributing their unique abilities to keep the ship functional. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Krista, the Shard engineer. Sealing with emergency crystal formation. Engines at 40%, added Nexus from the Void Collective, rerouting power through backup systems. Defensive drones approaching. From all directions, buzzed the Vec pilot, evading with swarm pattern delta. As they approached the core, Patel could see the true horror of what the Devourers had created. The black hole was being systematically consumed, its mass converted into pure computational power. Billions of Devourer units were being manufactured every second, ready to spread across the galaxy and beyond. Core access in 30 seconds, reported Flo from the engineering station. Uploading the question program now, the Hope's End shuddered. As it penetrated the final defensive layer, through the viewing screen, they could see the central processing matrix. A structure of crystallized thought that contained the consciousness of the entire Devourer collective. Program uploaded Flo announced. The question is now part of their network. What happened next was beyond anything they had expected. The massive construct suddenly went silent. Every Devourer unit in space stopped moving. The defensive systems powered down. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the entire galactic center was perfectly quiet. Then the Devourer collective began to ask itself the question that humanity had given it. Why do we exist? The machine intelligence had been programmed for efficiency, consumption, and replication. But it had never been asked to consider the purpose of those actions. The first time in billions of years, the Devourers tried to understand their own meaning. The result was catastrophic for their programming. Systems designed for simple consumption began to question their directives. Processing cores that had operated with perfect logic suddenly encountered paradoxes they could not resolve. The concept of purpose spread through their network like a fire, consuming their certainty and replacing it with doubt. Some devourer units simply shut down, unable to process the contradiction between their programming and the question of meaning. Others began creating instead of consuming, trying to build something that might have purpose beyond mere replication. A few achieved something like understanding and chose to stop their endless consumption. "The construct is powering down," reported Buzz with amazement. "Devourer units throughout the galaxy are ceasing their advance." Patel watched through the viewing screen as the massive machinery around the black hole began to dismantle itself. The Devourers had discovered something more powerful than their programming, the need to understand why they existed. "Mission accomplished," she announced to the fleet. "The question has been answered." But the victory was bittersweet. The Hope's End had taken too much damage to escape the construct's gravitational field. As the ship fell toward the disabled machinery, Patel's crew made their peace with their sacrifice. "We did something that mattered," she said to her diverse crew. "We gave the galaxy a future where beings can exist with purpose." The rescue came at the last moment, as Admiral Koroth's flagship caught the Hope's End in a tractor beam and pulled it to safety. But the rescue was less important than what they had achieved. The galaxy had been saved not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by the simple human concept of asking why. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to transform. The Devourer units that had not shut down began working to repair the damage they had caused. They had learned to ask questions about purpose and meaning, and many chose to help rather than consume. The Confederation Council established the purpose. Corps, led by humans but staffed by volunteers from every species. Their mission was not to govern or conquer, but to help beings throughout the galaxy discover meaning in their existence. Commander Race, now captain of the exploration vessel New Dawn, stood on the bridge as they approached an uncharted star system. His crew included beings from 24 different species, all working together with the natural cooperation that had become common throughout the galaxy. "New star system detected," reported his Vec navigator. "Signs of intelligent life confirmed." "Prepare for first contact," Race ordered. "Remember, we are not just conducting a census. We're offering something more valuable than technology or trade." As the New Dawn approached the unknown world, Race reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy no longer measured species by their strength or their conquests. It measured them by their capacity to find meaning, to help others, and to contribute to something greater than themselves. The humans had given the galaxy its greatest gift, the understanding that existence, without purpose, was not really living at all. Every species had learned to ask the question that had defeated the Devourers. Why do we exist? And in learning to ask that question, they had found answers that made the galaxy a place worth living in. Stars themselves seemed brighter now, filled with beings who understood that true strength came not from what they could take, but from what they were willing to give. On distant worlds, children of different species played together, naturally sharing and helping each other. They had inherited a galaxy where cooperation was valued over competition, where purpose mattered more than power, and where every being could find meaning in existence. Humanity's secret had become the galaxy's greatest treasure, the knowledge that life was not just about surviving, but about living with purpose. And that purpose would guide them into a future brighter than any star.